I am very happy to be here among all the cousins that are on this side of the city, or the country, I should say. Anyway, start telling you my story. It started in the year 1942. We lived in the city of Prešov. I was born in UNGVAR, which maybe some of the members of the family were perhaps also born there. And, but we moved to the city of Prešov, which was in Slovakia. My father was a sales representative for a flour mill company, and he used to go and sell flours anywhere, especially the army at that time. He even took me along sometimes to go and visit and sell flour. The Germans marched in 1942 to Slovakia. We had a lovely apartment, and somehow somebody, I guess from the Slovak hierarchy, wanted to take the apartment, and they did, and we had to move down from this area to a totally different area, one room like this, which was a bedroom, everything. And all of a sudden they are starting to take the young man to workforce. They say it's only for the day. But of course it never turned out to be the day. It only lasted a few times that it was for the day. And it was around Pesach, and the young man started to hide. And many were sadly enough caught because they came home for the Pesach Seder, and the Slovaks and the Germans knew it, so they did go from house to house. To my luck and to our luck, my father was hiding, and thank God they did not discover him. As we are just sitting around, it was in this yard, when somebody starts running down the street and says the Germans and the Slovaks are coming, which means not a good thing, because who knows who they are looking for. People who lived there, a few families, they ran into their homes. My mother and my sister my sister was 4 years old, I was 9 years old. We didn't know where to hide ourselves. We were in the middle of this yard. Suddenly we realized that there is a cellar on the side and the door is open. We ran into the cellar and pushed ourselves against the wall. My mother put her hand over my sister's mouth. She shouldn't cough. And all of a sudden we hear the big door opening. Here comes the soldiers, the German and the Slovak. And they go around and they stop at the edge of the cellar and they say, there must no one be here because the door is open. That was our first luck. That was our first kind of nest. They left, thank God. I could see their boots. They were so close that you could see their black boots. But of course, and you know, when you hear some kind of a gate opening, it's not a good feeling. It's very, you are afraid already. So they left. A few days later, my father came home, and he said, we are not going to stay here. We are from Hungary. We are Hungarian citizens. We're going to Hungary. So he got somehow he got hold of a balagula, and the man, we left whatever we had, put ourselves into this carriage, and started going, and we were going to go to Michalovce. Michalovce was closer to the Hungarian border. It didn't turn out to be so. The morning came and we were back in the same place where we started from, even though we went around all night. We went back to the apartment, and again, maybe a few days later, maybe a week later, my father says, I found someone else and we're getting to go. Again, we take our Siebensachen, almost nothing, and start going with this man. We did arrive to Michalovce. In Michalovce, my mother had a sister living there, and they had a big wholesale grocery store, so they had an exemption, so they were still open. We went to my aunt's house, and of course there was also an edict that if you are married, a young married man will not be taken away. So my cousin, who was getting ready to get married to this beautiful young woman, her name happened to be Alice also, and so they had to make a very fast wedding, 10 people, nothing wedding. We were sent out because we should not see, because this was all in secret. My sister and I, we were sent out. Anyway, they got married. Sadly, it did not help. They took him later on anyway. We stayed at my aunt's house for a short while, where my father says, we are on the way to Hungary. We have to find somebody to take us. He found somebody, I don't know how or what, but this man said he's not taking children. He will only take the parents. So it was decided that my parents will go, and then they'll send somebody back for us. We are spending a few days at my aunt's. We haven't heard anything. They send us out to buy ice cream, and my sister and I, we went, I don't know how far we had to go, but of course the ice cream started melting along the way, and here we are trying to lick it. We come back to my aunt crying bitter tears that the ice cream is gone. But there was a special ruse, meaning that they wanted to get us out of the house, because when we came back, my aunt tells us, your parents had been caught across the border, and they were brought back to Michalovce and put in jail. So they were in jail between Pesach and Shavuot. Every day we were allowed to go and visit them. They were allowed to be outside a half an hour or so, so every day we went to visit them. And the thing was that they were put in as smugglers, not as criminals. So they were maybe not held so tight in the jail. They were able to come out and have a visit with us. So it was a difficult time, of course, and many stores, I understand, were being closed. My aunt and uncle's store also was closed. And finally, my parents got out of jail. My father says, we're not staying here any longer, and I'm going to find somebody. To our luck, he did find someone, a young man who happened to be from UNGVAR and knew the road, how to go there. So we said our goodbyes and we went to a village to wait until the person who is at the border patrol will be the right guy. I'm sure, I don't know how much money he was given, but the idea was that he wasn't there. We were sitting in that village, I don't know, 3-4 days before it happened. So we are starting to go. We had to take like a pair of shoes on our shoulder with us because we went through the fields and they are muddy. While on the fields, I don't know how long we were already walking, my mother says, I can't move anymore. I'm going to sit down and wait here. You come back for me. Of course, we wouldn't, father wouldn't, neither did the leaders or anyone who was with us. We were not going to leave mother there. Anyway, by morning, we made it to the outskirts of UNGVAR, which was called Sobrance. It's outside of the city. I don't know how many, not too far away from the main city. In that city, in that Sobrance, my father's sister lived. So we arrive here, it's a Shabbat morning, we knock on the door, and they open the door and they look at us. Are we ghosts? How did we appear? From where? Of course, they made us come in immediately. They closed all the shades, neighbor shouldn't see. And my uncle decided he's going to go to shul in the city and let know the rest of the family. My father had brothers, my mother had sister and her parents, although they lived out of the city. So he went to shul and let them know that, look, this family just came over from Slovakia. What are we going to do? So in the evening, my father's two brothers came over, my mother's sister, and we were staying there just maybe another night, and then it was decided that we will be there. The Jewish cemetery, there is a caretaker, and he has like a hovel, a shed, whatever, maybe on top of his little house, and we will be there for a while. Well, when there was a funeral, we couldn't be outside. You see, my parents grew up in UNGVAR, and many people knew them, and so they couldn't show themselves at all. And so we were very much, anytime there was a funeral, we had to be inside that little place. Basically, my sister and I, we were playing Ben HaKvarot during the day.
Good thing you're not Kohen, huh?
That's right, never thought of that. Anyway, okay, so the family got together, and they can't stay in UNGVAR because, as I mentioned, they are known. Everybody will, somehow people find out that you are not living here, that you came from Slovakia. It was decided that my parents will go up to the city of Debrecen. Debrecen is the second largest city in Hungary after Budapest. And my sister and I, my Aunt Flori, my mother's sister, came to get us, and she took us over to my grandparents, who lived on the other side of the city of UNGVAR, called a little village Gerény, or in Czech it was Forjany. And so we went there, of course, coming to grandparents, the beautiful white bedding, the good food. But before all that, my aunt had to take, I don't know if you guys know what turpentine is. Well, she had to wash our hair, our body. We were full of lice. It was awful. I mean, she didn't even let us in the house. It was all done outside before we entered the house. But okay, it was fine, thank God. And it was nice to be at the grandparents. I'm telling you, my grandma and my aunt, they got up at 4 in the morning Friday and baked delicious langos and challah. It was very idyllic at that time. It was very idyllic at that time. But I resembled very much my mother. So many of the neighbors, at least somebody across, remembered my mother very well. And they were trying to find out if we came from somewhere else, not in Hungary. In the meantime, my grandparents had a little vineyard, and there was a grape harvest. And of course, we went along. My aunt said, here, take this little basket and put the grapes from one basket to the other, and you'll help, because we wanted to help. Of course, I guess I ate so many grapes, and so did my sister, that we became ill. We had to be taken back to the house because we were of no use. Anyway, it was an adventure. The days go on. It's a beautiful kind of warm summer. And we are outside. All of a sudden, we hear big knocks on the door. Well, at any of those times, if you have big knocks on the door, it doesn't bode well. You titter, you get afraid. So my aunt, who was a very down-to-earth person, opens the door, and here stand 3 gendarmes. The Hungarian gendarmes were very fierce, tall, handsome. They had these helmets with feathers, very fierce, very scary. I'm told later on that I was white as a sheet, because, you know, when you feel, there is a saying in Hungarian, ha vaj van a fejed, de ne menj a napra, nem tudom, ha megérted. If you have butter on your head, don't go on the sun. But it's a very Hungarian, the way they say it, it's very, meaning If you are afraid, if you know there is something that you are guilty of, you better not. Anyway, so finally my aunt managed to quiet them down. These are my nieces from wherever, somewhere in Hungary, my sister's children, and they are here for the summer. They went away. So we kind of felt that it was the neighbors who instigated the situation. Of course, comes the month of September, I have to go to school. My sister was only 4 years old, but I have to go to school. So I was transported up to Debrecen to join my parents. So they lived in half the size in this room, and they rented a room at a widow lady, and I don't think she asked where we were from. She was just a nice person, and my mother was able to help her. My mother used to didn't know how to sew. My mother used to know how to be in the kitchen, so she was really helping. And I think she forgot, or it didn't matter to her where we're from. And we lived like that in a very quiet way. But lucky for us, we had a relative from my father's side, actually, in Debrecen, family Klein, who were related to, wait a minute, in Slovakia, I don't know if you heard of Vranov, the city, maybe you didn't, it doesn't matter. There was it was a Tsorev family. Anyway, it was my father's side family, and this couple, Berkovich, Julius Berkovich, also came from Slovakia, and somehow that place became our main meeting place. And this cousin Julius was a well-to-do man, and in no time he got to know the police inspector, whoever was in charge. He knew already what is going on in the city at that time. And every time there was it was called a razzia, which means they went and house to house and checked papers as to where are people from. But they knew that there are Slovak people around. But if you have a piece of paper that looks good, it's okay. But anyway, so he was able to tell us more or less that there's something happening in the city. And he said, tomorrow or next few days, get out of the city. So we took a train and just went up and down and stopped in one of the ranch places. And the excuse was that we children needed a little fresh air, so my parents took us out from the city. The big problem was father wouldn't be able to eat the pasta because, of course, it was not just butter, but we managed. Somehow it worked. And this went on for a while, and there were a lot of edicts going on in the meantime. Edicts meaning that every time on a wall there was something pasted against the Jews. Just about 1943, my sister had gotten the whooping coughs. I don't know how you call it. Anyways, I don't know how you explain it any differently, but my aunt was told, and my grandparents, that the best thing is for her to change climate. So they brought her to Debrecen to be with us. And we lived like this, very quietly. My mother had another sister not far from Debrecen. She was called Nirbator, and this was Hanku's mother. And she was brought into the hospital in Debrecen, and we used to take the tram and go and visit her. Mother used to cook things. So she was there for, I don't know, for a while. And the winter was very harsh, of course. I had to go to school. So every time I went to school, daily, every time there was an inspection, they had to send me out because I was really illegal, and only the homeroom teacher and the principal knew that I'm from Slovakia. To our luck, we spoke a very good Hungarian because we always spoke Hungarian. So it wasn't that we spoke Slovak, we spoke Hungarian. So, you know, nobody could maybe detect that I have perhaps a different accent, I don't know. I spent some time kind of walking around the city, getting to know Debrecen because I was out often enough. Anyway, we lived quietly. We used to go down to this Klein family to find out what's happening. That was like the center of our information bureau. And comes March 1944, March 19th, a beautiful Sunday. The Germans march into Hungary and starts another era.
I have to ask a question before you go on. I have to go back one step with you.
Okay.
When you went, the story you told about with the caretaker in the cemetery.
Yeah.
You were living there. Just before that, you mentioned that your father, Grandpa, had family in I'm not sure where. In
Sobrans, yeah.
Sobrans, and you went to his sister's house?
Yes.
Which sister?
You wouldn't know because she never came back.
She wasn't, okay.
No, she never came back from the Auschwitz. Besides, she was older.
Right.
She was older. Wait a minute. Leah's mother was a sister to her.
That's why I asked.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
That's why I
Their family name was Moshkovich, I think, if I am not mistaken. Tova's family. Yes, her parents. Her parents. Right. Exactly. Her parents.
I missed the last, because she was talking. Say it again, I missed it.
I said Tova's parents.
Yeah, were?
Moshkovich. That
Yeah.
was the family
Oh, that
we
was
went
the
to.
family.
Yes.
Okay, so the family that my mother, she told a story about going to live in the cemetery and meeting these relatives, and that was Tova's.
That's Lily's.
That's
Lily's, not Tova's parents, Lily's
Tova's
parents.
parents.
The grandparents of Tova. Yeah, Lily's parents. Yes. Huh?
Right.
Yeah, Lily's parents, that's
I
right.
knew there was a connection
Yes,
somewhere.
you're right, you're right.
מה הקשר ביניהם?
בין לילי ולאה.
Lily and Leah are first cousins.
גם כמו אני גם כן first cousin to Leah.
Leah and to
Their
Lily.
parents
Yeah.
were siblings.
Parents.
Yeah.
דרך ההורים שלה.
אז אולי נספר על ההורים, על האחים, על האחיות האלה.
לא, אני לא הכרתי אותם. אני רק הכרתי את...
אבל כמה אחים, כמה אחיות, how many?
You don't have
There was Irena, there was Serid, there was
That's what she's talking about. Okay.
Malvinka, זאת הייתה Malvina.
I can give you names.
Take out the picture of the camera.
I have it.
What,
I have it.
of Lily's parents?
No.
I'm talking about Lily's
Grandpa's
parents.
sisters.
No.
Grandpa's
Grandpa's
sisters.
sisters. I have the names.
You do?
I do.
Okay, let's
I
look.
just saw them. A minute ago. I'll find it again.
Lily's mother.
So
All right.
did you see, was your family able to meet up with Serenity at all?
No.
No.
They stayed in Slovakia. We had no contact with them till we met them in Israel.
And how did you, this is skipping, but these people are all related to Serenity.
Yeah.
So they want to know.
How did Grandpa find Serenity after the war?
Just a minute.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I don't know. Maybe, where's Moshik?
Moshe
Oh.
Cousins.
Where did he go? Maybe he knows because I don't know how we got in touch unless Uncle Isidore, who wound up in Chile.
Yeah.
Through him,
you got it.
we knew probably that about Serenity.
So
Yeah.
there was Malvina, there
Yeah.
was Helen.
Malvina, that's Lily's mother?
Malvina.
Malvina, there was
That's Lily's mother?
no.
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
And
Yes.
there was Helen.
Yes.
and there was
ציפי
Jizzy
וג'יני, הוא ישחק.
and Joseph.
No, you got it mixed up.
I got it mixed up. Okay,
Sorry.
Yeah, go back to your
David,
story.
David, no, you got it mixed up.
We'll do that later.
But,
I didn't know if there was a kesher.
No, we'll do
yeah,
that later.
Uncle Isidore and Uncle Ichu, the two brothers who came back, but it was more Isidore, I think, who gave us somehow the information.
The bottom line of it is, all this kesher, my mother, is through her father.
Correct.
No, I'm just saying.
Serenade.
And her father
our
and,
grandmother.
and your grandmother.
Serenade.
קראו לה סרינני, שרה. You know she is.
יש לי את הדרכון שלה, זה בסדר.
Okay, good. Okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right, so anyway, where are we?
The Germans
The
arrived.
Germans arrived
May,
March.
Another...
March 19th, 1944,
Three.
and
Three, no?
לא,
44.
43.
Hungary?
to Hungary in 1944.
44.
We are now already in Hungary.
For like a year and a half.
A year and a half
Since September 42.
for me? No, since April 1942 till March 1944 we were in Hungary.
Okay, so how the day-to-day life, I mean, how is it happening, you know, financially, money-wise?
It's the best question and I have no answer for you, but the brothers, in those days, Shai, in those days the brothers helped. The brothers helped us.
Fine.
Serenani's brothers helped us be in Hungary and later on too.
Yeah, but okay, but that's a war, they have their own issues, I'm sure.
But they didn't, the Hungarian Jews did not have the main issues till March 1944. They had issues by edicts, by not being allowed to go to university, not being allowed to do certain things, but they kind of felt comfortable in their being. Hungary will never give up.
They were still able to survive, and they were still
Very
able to
much
work.
surviving,
Yeah.
very much surviving. They never said, Hungary is, you know, some people who had been in the army in 1914 and came back with all kind of awards and things in the First World War. Oh, I am a Hungarian, I have this big medals, they're not going to bother me. Are you kidding? They took them first, maybe. I mean, it didn't matter anything, just didn't matter. So, okay, so 1944 arrives, immediately they are setting up ghettos in Debrecen, and immediately they are doing all kind of unimaginable things. How and what, my father said, we're not going in the ghetto. We're just not going. People don't know us, we are not going in the ghetto. This cousin Julius from Slovakia, he gave us, he says, all right, you're not going in the ghetto, here is a name with a family with 2 children, if you can get some papers, here is the information. He gave us that, and he gave us a key to a beautiful house in the woods, about half hour by tram, and they are going back because Slovakia was quiet around that time. Somehow the Germans had enough, or they stopped the deportation. It was like quiet. So our cousin Julius said, we're going back. And my father said, we have nothing to go back for. We didn't have a house that we left there. We're not going back. So what happens? We decide that we are going to take on Christian names. But how do you do that? So with the information that cousin Julius gave for my mother, she went into the city hall wearing a coat with a yellow star and another coat on top of that, and presents it to the clerk, and she says, Mayor, I would like to have these papers. Could you please give them to me? So he looks at her. He says, and you know, I'm sure her heart was not here, but here. And he looks at her and he says, lady, why do you need these papers? What's wrong? What happened to your papers? Somehow they got lost, and as you know, you cannot walk around without papers nowadays. Before you put your foot out, you know, if you don't have papers, you are in trouble. God helped, he gave us the papers. It's another mess. He gave us the papers, and we decided to move away from that neighborhood. We found another apartment in the other side of the city, and we saw people being pushed on the street. We didn't know really what is happening, but we didn't know. We were able to live quietly in another neighborhood. In the meantime, they had bombings. The Allies were going through Hungary to Romania for the oil fields. So they were bombing the oil fields, so they went through and threw quite a few bombs down in Debrecen too along the way. It was a scary time, but okay, we took on this task, and we took out this apartment where part of the taking care of was somehow we had to take care of a dog. It was a sheepdog, a pulikutya, Hungarian sheepdog, about this big. So my mother, I guess, took out the task because somehow father was afraid of it, and maybe we were too. Anyway, we are living quietly. I don't know, nobody asked us anything. We were just lucky. One day we decided that we are going to see that apartment or the house in the woods. We took the tram. It was like a half-hour ride, and here we come and arrive into this beautiful apartment. House stands by itself with a gina around it, a garden, and beautiful furniture, clean sheets, and some chocolate, and I think we discovered the radio. It was like, how can we not come and live here? So we divided our time sort of between the two apartments. And one day, middle of the summer, we are there in the villa, and we hear this big knock. So, as I mentioned before, another big knock where you really are afraid what next. We open the door, my mother opens the door, and here stands a very handsome Army or Air Force officer, Hungarian, and he looks at us and he says, you people, what are you doing here? How come you are in my house? Where is your police? Where is something? How do you... So my mother invites him, come in, sir, you must be tired from your journey, and let me make you scrambled eggs, an omelette, something. Let's quietly sit down. My father, in the meantime, says, we have another apartment at the other end of town, and I have all my papers. This was only temporary that we came here. So he sat down, and to our luck, maybe a half hour later or so, he gets a call. He has to go back to his unit. So it was another miracle, in a sense, another miracle. So I was the one who went all the way across town. I knew my way around to go get father and bring him back, that thank God this man has left. And we lived quietly. It was nice. It was summertime. We had this little garden. My mother loved to garden. And we're getting closer to the holidays, and bombing is going on more often. We ran down. There was a basement. We ran down in the basement because it was very fierce. And we found a wooden bathtub, and we sat down somewhere must have been like a safsal, and we sat down and put this over our heads, yelling Shema Yisrael, until it eventually stopped. Thank God we were saved. We got out of there. And a few days later, maybe 2 weeks later, I'm not sure of the date or the timing, we see people going by the house carrying a basket and blankets, and we are asking them, where are you people going? What's going on? Well, we're going to the shelter. There is a university. Debrecen has a very famous university. We're going to the university. They have a big shelter because, the Germans and the Russians are going to have a big fight here. They both want to keep the city. So, you know, we can't tell them we would welcome the Russians, you know, right then and there. So what do? We take a basket, we take some blankets, and we also go. Luckily, it wasn't more than about a 20-minute walk from where we were in the house.
So that's like September, October 44.
Yes.
So January, the Soviets get Czechoslovakia and Hungary. January 45.
45.
Yeah.
That's when they liberated Auschwitz, January 27th. They liberated, but this was in September.
Yeah, by that time they're pushing the Germans from Romania, Yugoslavia, and of course the Soviet Union.
Yes, yes.
So just at the doorstep.
They were exactly. They were coming. Look, they were standing there before, at that time when the Germans were going to, where Germans were putting the Jews in the wagons. They were standing at the border.
To the west, yeah.
They were standing at the borders. So anyway, we go along because what can you do, right? And we go to this shelter. We found a little corner. Also, we put down the blankets and something. And my father, being a religious man, he wouldn't eat without a hat. So he ate in the hat. And somehow, a few days later, we hear some rumors. He must be Jewish, or they must be Jewish because he's not eating, he's only eating in his hat. What do? Off comes the hat. You know, you have to get yourself acclimated to the situation. Anyway, for about a few days, maybe a week, my mother and I went out early in the morning before the fighting began, and she cooked fast some soup from the vegetables we had, because father had a problem eating any of the food that was offered. But after a while, it became too fierce. It was impossible to really go and not be in between the fighting. It took about another 2 weeks or so, and the Russians marched in. They were able to push the Germans out, and the Russians were not exactly, how shall I say, the nicest of soldiers. They are known for it. But at least we considered them liberators. They liberated us. So in October 1944, we were liberated by the Russians. So nobody else, as a matter of fact, my father, we stayed about 2 or 3 weeks longer in the shelter because we were afraid to go out in case there is an exchange. You never know what can happen. And we had no radio then. And my father finally ventured out into the city, and he comes back, he says, there are no Jewish people in the city. There is no Jewish community. He couldn't, he knew exactly where it was before. You could only see some young man who escaped either from the Arbeitslager or from wherever. So after a while, we said, well, we can't stay here. So we moved into the city, and that apartment became like a grand central station, because anybody who came through that city at that time found out there's a family, they came to look at us, a mother and father and 2 children. They couldn't believe how we survived. So anyway, this went on for a while. And slowly, the people who started coming back were mainly the young people or people who were in hiding. In about February or so, my father says, I want to go to UNGVAR. I want to see what happened to my family. I'm going to UNGVAR. So, okay, mother is we're trying to hold him back. It's winter. What are you going for? What are you trying to find? He wouldn't be dissuaded. And then, so he left and he went to the train station, and a few hours later somebody comes telling us, Mrs. Neumann, your husband has been kidnapped by the Russians. I guess they knew him and they recognized him. It didn't matter that he had the paper. The Russians called it bumashka. The guy didn't look at it. They wanted to fill in their wagons to go to Siberia. They didn't ask if you have a piece of paper or not. My mother, the next morning, she goes down to the train station and she finds the nachalnik, the man in charge, or the few men, the officers in the Russian army, many of them were Jewish. And that was really a good help. Mother knew how to read and write Russian because in the village, that's what they had. They actually were learning Ukrainian, not so much, but it's the same Cyrillic language or writing. So she knew, and somehow she told her story, and these guys helped her get on the train that went toward Romania, where they found out that this other train went toward Romania, going to Siberia, but it went through toward Bucharest or Brasov. Anyway, they got her the best ticket, and in this rapid, very famous train, she got on it. We were left with some people who took care of us. I don't know if we knew them, but they took care of us. And she followed him. To her luck, to our luck, father was able to jump the train. He got off just before it reached the border. And he made his way back to Romania, which was the city Arad. And somehow there was a Jewish community there. And he left his name on a list. So when mother got to that city, I don't know, a week or later, she found his name that he passed through here on his way back to Debrecen. So thank God, eventually, both of them wound up back with us, and we were again a family. So then...
How old was he? How old was he?
Father?
Yeah.
He was born in 1897, so you figure it out how old he was then.
50 and he jumped from a train.
I don't know how he did it. I never asked him. We were happy to have him back. Huh? You know, you do whatever you can to save your life. You do anything. You jump a train, then maybe it stops. Maybe it stopped and he was able to get off. And how he got back to the city of Arad, I don't remember. Maybe we talked about it, maybe we didn't. I don't know, I'm sure we did. So eventually we were, thank God, again back a family, and finally we moved out of that apartment to a little better apartment. And in the meantime, people started coming back after in January 27th, the Auschwitz was liberated. But there was a huge death march. So I don't know how many people survived, from these different places. Anyway, so we were liberated basically 6 months after we were, after the Germans marched in. So maybe that was our luck. So I can stop here and you can ask me questions, because then it's a whole different story. But this was the main thing, how we survived that part.
Who did you find living afterwards from your family and friends and extended family?
What dear?
Who survived? Who did you find afterwards?
Well, that was later. Well, my Aunt Floris...
Coming back to UNGVAR, you didn't find it?
We didn't go back.
Didn't.
My father at that time wanted, we didn't go back. But we knew that UNGVAR and Munkac and all those places were taken to Auschwitz or other similar places. My grandparents, my mother saw her parents the last time in 1942 before she went to Debrecen. And being that she was afraid that she's going to be recognized during the day, so my father's brother took her at night to visit the parents, because in case somebody sees her daytime and recognize her. It was a constant fear, constant fear. It was for a long time before I was not afraid of a policeman or somebody in a uniform. You know, we have jury duty in America. I went once and I said, I can't make it here. it's just too much for me. So I begged off. I was able to beg off. I couldn't look at all those policemen. And actually they are not doing anything wrong. And not today either, but this was still in the mind.
You said that that suddenly you came back and there were no Jews around. Do you remember how it dawned upon you that what really happened? I mean, the people coming back telling stories of...
No. You see, you have to remember that it started for me in 1942. I was 9 years old. So 2 years later, I was only 11. I had no such questions. I only afterwards, later, now, in the, you know, when I became more adult or people were talking, and I see people coming back, but I don't think I could conceive it as to what exactly had happened. So it's a different approach. I was not an adult.
Alice, now a year back, when you were thinking about your family, your father's decision, your mother's decision, what do you think take away the miracle and the ashgacha and the luck and everything? What helped them make the right move, the right decision? What helped them survive?
Out of the box.
I mean, you know, God's hand. You have to have, you know, you have to believe that it was God's hand.
Only God's hand.
Yes, and a little extra luck, or maybe in those days people didn't have the machshev and all that, and no telephone, and then nobody thought that this can be done, and somehow.
Yeah, but there's one thing that goes across in every story of survival when decisions are made. It's like the first decision is we need to leave now.
Yes.
That decision was taken upon less than a few percent of the Jewish people, living all around the back then occupied Europe and later on occupied Europe.
I don't know how my father was clever enough at that time to say, we are leaving. And we are Hungarian citizens, we're going to Hungary. Because at that time, Hungary was still very good. Very good.
He was a man of action, he was a man of...
I can't say that he was a man. I mean, it was mother who was more of an action.
Yeah.
Yes, mother...
Who made the right decision?
It was mother, yes, but, you know, father, of course, went along. Huh? No, it's okay. I mean, I can't really decide, but I know that anything that had, I think, really the thinking of the action, maybe he added to it, yes, we're going, you were right, but maybe it started with mother.
Mother.
Yeah.
Always the women.
How did you get from there to DP camps?
Well,
The next part of the story.
yeah, all right, so
How
then,
did you get out of where you were?
Right, so this becomes now Soviet-occupied territory.
or Soviet,
45.
yes.
So that's like the East Pact now.
Yeah, you are under, yeah, the Russians are there. They are sitting in the park, playing the balalaikas and drinking, and yes, they were there.
But you're safe.
We were safe. I mean, they didn't really bother.
Okay.
No, they didn't really bother you as somebody living there. I don't think they were a very nice group of soldiers, but we weren't bothered. Slowly, some of the schools started, like not Jewish schools yet, but the Christian schools started. I have, well, thank you. I have.
After the movie was shot, right?
Thank you. All of a sudden, you know, young people who came back and didn't find family at all, who went back to their homes, when they survived, they went back to their homes, they didn't find family. They've decided they are putting on a tarmil on their backs and they're going to Palestine. And actually, when we had family coming back, my aunt who we had left in the hospital in Debrecen because she was ill, and the Germans took all the Jews from the hospital. Happens to be that transport didn't go to Auschwitz, it ended up in Austria. So my aunt, sick as she was, managed to get through those few months and came back to her home in near Bator, near Debrecen. And some of her children returned, and my Aunt Flory, who eventually came back from Auschwitz and found a man to marry him already in Debrecen. We had the wedding in my aunt's house in near Bator. I mean, you know, some of it are miracles, but we did it. And my aunt lived with us in Los Angeles. Where are we? She lived where, you know, we lived in New York together. We lived all the time together. Anyway, after about 2 years or so, we did not feel comfortable to stay. My mother always wanted to come to Palestine. She said, we want to go to Palestine. So how do you manage that? In the meantime, a few relatives came back, really not many, really not many. I never added it up, but just a few. And we were like a Grand Central Station because somebody found out, came to the big city. Maybe they didn't go back to their homes, I'm not sure. Anyway, we somehow decided that we are not staying in Hungary. This is not the place for us, and we are going to Palestine. So you can't just go like that. The Russians are not ready to open the gates for you. We found out that there is a Zionist group, young people going, and they have this group, and we can join them. So again, we pack up a few things, my aunt and uncle together with us, and we start traveling toward the west. Well, that wasn't such an easy traveling. It took us, I don't know how many weeks to, first of all, we got ready, we somehow managed to give up the apartment. There was nothing there for us. And we started, my father wanted to work because poor man, he didn't work for 2-3 years. So the work we were doing, that time, cigarettes, everybody was smoking. There was no such thing. We used to have filter cigarettes, and we used to have a specific kind of a thing that you push the tobacco into the cigarette thing. And we were helping that he was making a few penge. That time it was not, now it's forint. That time it was still penge. Anyway, it was not he needed to do something. So we gathered up and we went with this group to Budapest, and then eventually we wound up again somehow in a wagon and sleeping on the floor, and we had to wait at the border in Hungary before the Russians. I think for a month we stayed in one place because the Russians wouldn't let through the border from Hungary to Austria. Eventually we made it. We wound up in one DP camp. DP camp means displaced persons camp, and it's like a Machane Plitim, but they didn't keep us there. They put us in the second one, and we were under the United Nations and the American zone. We were wound up in Germany in the American zone, in the city of Wetzlar. And it was a big place. There was like 4,000 people eventually. And we were supported by the American Army, and we were supported by Joint Distribution Committee, by the United Nations, and of course the United States, the 48 states at that time. We didn't have Hawaii and what was Alaska. Anyway, we lived there. It was an officer's German officers' quarters. They were like two-story buildings, quite a few. In the beginning, it was very difficult. We didn't have the kosher food, and they brought it from somewhere. But somehow more and more Jews came. The Russians opened the borders somehow at that time, and many Polish, Lithuanian, Latvian Jews came, whoever could escape, not to be under the Russian regime, escaped.
So that's 46. That's 46.
46. So this was like August, September 46. Yeah, he's keeping tabs on my numbers, huh?
Oh, that's like a year and 2 months.
2 years, yes,
after the
more or less, right. So we wound up living in the city of Wetzlar, where, as I say, the beginning was awful, but then slowly it enveloped and developed, and they established schools for children. So we went to school because we were running around otherwise. But they had very good people from Latvia and Lithuania who knew terrific Hebrew. And they immediately started teaching us Hebrew. Then we had also many shlichim who came across from Palestine in those days. And somehow things improved, developed. There were some concerts, there were some football games, and of course the young men came from other DP camps, and we girls were all standing, and cheering on. And there were a lot of Zionist organizations. There wasn't an organization that didn't have a representative. And we girls only went to the most good-looking men, never mind the rest. We didn't know what the Sisma or Mashu. We went to where they were the best-looking men. And we were there 3 years, and they taught us, Ivrit be'Ivrit. It was really a fantastic background. That's actually where my Hebrew still comes from. In a way. And somehow people made the best of it. Eventually they were bartering with the Germans. Many people found relatives in America, in Canada, and so they sent packages. One time during a Hanukkah time, there was a big, we had like a performance, children, and it was very beautiful. Maybe somebody was singing, I don't know. 2 very good-looking American soldiers sat down next to us. My sister, who was always short, like this, I think she's short. Anyway.
To this day. To this day.
Yeah. And she had this, it was cold, so she had this babushka around her, and only the 2 eyes you could see. And these 2 soldiers came to us, and one of them spoke a little Yiddish. So, of course, we started some kind of a conversation. And we became very friendly with them. And he eventually brought us chocolates and coffee, and we were bartering. My parents were somehow bartering, meaning they went to the Germans selling it, and maybe they got a piece of material, and my mother made a dress for me. We were always, my father says, my NEUMAN girls were always looking the best. So we were, thank God.
About Sherry Nanny.
Yeah.
At their house in Netanya, or even before the Ma'abara, was always one top ahead, a bit better than others.
So somehow, and we had great, there was a lot of learning, I have to say, so we were occupied. We were my parents did not have, father really didn't do anything, but my mother was always busy, and my aunts the same way, and my uncle. So somehow we got it through. I don't have the worst memories of it, neither do I have the best, but it wasn't really a living in a sense. So we were there for almost 3 years, and it happens that we were going to go. Oh, by the way, when the United Nations agreed to declare the State of Israel in 1947, November 29th, November 29. We were by the radio listening, of course, and counting together. Anyway, so we were very friendly with this American soldier. They brought us all kind of goodies, and it was wonderful for a short while. In the meantime, the Americans decided they are closing up this camp, or any camp already. They are closing up the camps. We didn't get father was not well. So mother decided that we cannot go and get on a ship to go to Palestine. They were being shot at that time. The English right. The English didn't allow you so easily. And they wound up in Cyprus. The people who did go wound up in Cyprus. Or the big ship that was the Exodus, the 4,500 people were taken back. So it was horrible. So it was decided that we're going to try to go to America. And somehow it took time until we were able to switch the papers. We maybe got some sponsor through somebody. You cannot just come in so easily. So as I say, in the meantime, the camp was closing, so we had to move. So they moved us to another camp, which was already more lovely, kind of small city, more cottages. We had a little apartment that was felt our own. And we had to wait for papers to come to America. To my luck, there was a time when I met my future husband. He was in that camp. And then he happened to come to America a few months before me. But he went to Los Angeles, and we stayed in New York. And then we stayed in touch. And this American family, the parents of this soldier, they found out when we arrived to New York, to the Jewish agency, we had their address, and we were able to get in touch with them through help of the Jewish agency in New York. And these people came, and they didn't know what to do with us. They were so wonderful. They took me to buy a coat. It was like September already, Chagim, coming toward the winter. And they take me to big department stores. Barbara would know, Klein and Orbach's and big department stores. I have never seen anything like that. So much that I could not make up my mind. And my mother was so upset. She says, "What's the matter with you? These people are so wonderful. How come you are so obstinate?" But I was 16. I didn't know any better at that time, Okay, so finally.
That's the year 47?
46.
46?
No.
Coming to New York?
1949.
49.
1949. So we arrived in 1949 in end of August to New York, and then I was there. We were there, lived there in New York for 3 years, and then I got married and moved to Los Angeles. The same young man came back and got me, and we got married. And then a year later, my parents moved to Los Angeles. So I have been in America since 1949.
And then in 1956, and I'll continue.
Anyway, yeah, we got married in 1952 and had a good life, thank God. Hardworking, very hardworking. But we established a family. We established to be in contact with the community, Jewish community, the Beit Knesset, education, and we made a beautiful life, thank God. So.
And if you want to read more and know more.
And there are more, yeah, there are more details.
My mother wrote a book about her story. Are you on camera? And it's called From UNGVAR to Beverly Hills. UNGVAR is where she grew up.
90212. That was your address.
19211. 19211. No, 90211. Yeah.
211.
No, Akshav.
I remember 212.
Akshav.
Okay, forget it.
No, it was never 212.
Okay, sorry.
It was 210. I know. I grew up with her.
Anyway, it's if anything, it's available on Amazon. So it's.
So now going back to the earlier question was, how did you find your relatives? You've gotten to New York, and then you moved to LA. And how did you find Sarah Naimi? And I don't know who else. I mean,
my father had two brothers who came back. One brother wound up living in Czechoslovakia, in Prague. Well, from Slovakia. I don't know if they lived in Prague. But he and his Julius, who was his brother-in-law actually, and his wife, this family, they, I guess, couldn't come to America, but they got visas to go to Chile. And they wound up going to Chile. As a matter of fact, yeah. So he was the one probably who, and his brother, his youngest brother, Uncle Ichu, who lived in Slovakia, in near Prague or something, what was it? Whatever it was called, and then he came to New York, and maybe it was them who were able to somehow know, because Serenini, your family survived in Slovakia. And then I don't know too much about it. So I can't, I don't know.
They didn't tell the stories about it?
Maybe they were talking.
Because they're writing down all the time. She was writing letters to your father every week.
Yeah, but I don't know if this was a conversation. Maybe it was, but I was too young to think about it or to be in that conversation.
Because I remember Grandma writing airmail. Every week she write down a mail to Yenebachi, Michubachi, and then come, and we're receiving the blue.
Those were the thin airmail envelopes, yes, in those days. Aerogram, and you wrote very little because you wanted to fill it in, of course.
With a great stamp on it.
Sticky stamp.
Yeah. Yeah, she's like opening with very, very slowly.
Yes, they shouldn't tear everything, right. But I don't know if maybe when they were visiting here, they may have discussed it, but I don't recall. I really don't.
Did they ever see each other?
Yeah,
yes.
In the 80s.
Yes,
in the early 80s.
My parents came to visit in Netanya, yes.
Yes, they came. They stayed near.
Yes, I know you do, yeah.
Excuse me,
You were here?
You were too, but your father tried
I remember going to Netanya, to your grandparents' house. I remember your
Maria's. Serenity was living in
and her husband was Herman.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, אני זוכר אותם עומדים בפתח הדלת בבית של נתניה.
נכון.
לא פגשת אותנו,
ההורים שלה.
אולי לא פגשתי אתכם כי...
לא, היית ה-80 ופגשת אותנו.
גליה, היית
שנות ה-80 כבר היינו.
היית סוג של סלקן.
טוב, בסדר.
אני זוכר.
לא, כי אתה היית
קיבלתי חליפה אדומה מאוד יפה.
אני זוכרת בפעם הראשונה שבאנו לארץ, זה היה 64 בערך, משהו, no, but I think we went, they were still living in yeah, but it was called Shikun Batikim. So we come there and we have not real address, but Oscar, my husband, is asking the guy in the מכולת, אם אתה יודע את הכתובת, זה השם דילר, כן. אז הוא אומר, was kannst du schon in Jiddisch? Was fragst du? מה איתך? אתה לא מדבר יידיש? It was funny, but we found them in the Mavarot. Yes, I remember that.
70 or 71? 70. We were here the first time, I think it was 70 or 69. We came for a summer for a month or a month and a half.
Yes, we did. We lived on Rehov Frischman.
Apartment on Rehov Frischman.
That's right.
And that is when I met
the family.
Your grandparents for the first time, your whole family.
But that was,
אחרי מלחמת ששת הימים, כולם באו אחרי מלחמת ששת הימים.
אחרי ששת הימים.
This was after my mom been at your place.
what there?
My mom,
Yes.
she visited you
Yes, she did.
at 68.
With her friend,
City.
Sidi, and how, of
Yeah.
course. It was wonderful, yes.
No, I remember you talking about your father, your mother, and then, okay, father, mother. Then I realized, Yeni Bachi and Oshinani.
Right.
That's it, yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
And
Exactly.
I remember as a kid when your dad came over to our house, he stayed there for a few days.
They'd
He was
stay,
sitting, he in the terrace, he, grandma,
Yes.
and Ichu in
They came
And
together.
It was very hot, didn't have air condition, stayed there, and he tried to talk to me. And I know only Hebrew, and he know only English and
Hungarian.
Yeah, Hungarian.
And-
Trying
or
to speak to me
Yiddish.
English, I don't understand.
Or Yiddish.
Speak to me.
I know.
And yeah, you got a candy? No.
Yes, it was, that's right, they came together. Ishu and his wife and my parents, they came together to visit your grandmother.
Yeah, well, it was a big occasion because grandma's brother's coming. And
Yeah,
I wanted to see who's grandma's brothers. And I see old people. I didn't realize that the brothers they should be young and they became old people, grandparents.
that's so funny, that's so funny. Yeah, your grandmother was a beautiful woman. She had blue eyes, blonde, she was a very beautiful
Neuman's eyes.
Neumann, yes, yes. Yes, well, so that's the story, and we are very lucky to have gone through what we went through, and we were together, you know, a family, always. It was, thank God. So.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My